Welcome. Thank you for joining me for another edition of Slightly Problematic. Tonight, I would like to talk to you about the problematic process of knowledge generation from fieldwork, and also from archival research and from the synthesis of non-Western and Indigenous scholarship. As Western scholars, there are a few assumptions that we are often guilty of bringing with us when we set out to learn across time and across cultures. The first of these is that a researcher will be able to reach a level of cultural competency to understand the written or oral texts which form the base of our data. Presumably, like cultural cryptographers, time plus process will sooner or later lead to our decoding of meanings which are hidden in plain sight. 2. That Western theorists have developed theory and methodologies which provide tools that can compensate for ignorance and ethnocentrism to effectively translate a text, a narrative, or a story from an Indigenous or non-Western author or speaker into Western frameworks, which align with a positivistic perspective on knowledge creation. 3. That Western theories belong wholly to Western culture, such that credit can be attributed to individual Western theorists or to periods of Western thought, such as the Enlightenment, the Modernist era, or the Postmodern era. And 4. That what emerges from a researcher's fieldwork is the result of the research design and the methods of the researcher, rather than an appropriation of incomplete impressions gained of fully developed epistemologies that are neither connected to Western ways of knowing, nor even definitively compatible with Western ways of knowing. Taken separately, these assertions can seem somewhat benign, and particularly as anthropologists, it's extremely pleasant to presume that what you are doing in ethnographic fieldwork is building your cultural competency up to a point where you'll be able to effectively communicate ideas and understandings across cultures, and isn't finding Western theoretical frameworks which can be used to integrate or explain unfamiliar ideas or occurrences the key to communicating non-Western knowledge to Western audiences? And is there really any harm to having to nudge things a little bit to make them fit into conversation with existing perceptions of what's what? Isn't that just the tried and true process of hermeneutics at play to find the essence behind the text? And what's the harm with attributing, say, to Michel Calon, Bruno Latour, or John Law, forgive me if I butchered their names, for discovering a way to look past centuries of the Western belief in the universal truth of the Cartesian divide in order to posit that it is possible to understand complex systems through decentering and deprivileging humans as the only sources of agency and intelligent action by making room for non-human and non-entities? These questions are intimately linked to just how we should consider the results of our fieldwork and the subsequent knowledge that may emerge from it today. Going back, the Age of Discovery, as it was romantically referred to, was a period of intensification of European colonialism and imperialism. The world was seen through an ethnocentric lens of cultural evolution, in which the West was at the height of human progress, and as such was the arbiter of the contentious cultural constructs of knowledge, fact, and truth. And at the same time that geographies were appropriated, so too were non-Western epistemologies. And at the same time that resources were mined, so too was knowledge. And similarly to other colonial industries, what was being taken was not intended to be shared. Language, religion, and virtually every other facet of cultural life that ethnologists were collecting was made illegal under colonial rule. And while ethnologists partook in what James Clifford referred to as a form of cultural collecting, which highlights the ways that diverse experiences and facts are selected, gathered, detached from their original temporal occasions, and given enduring value through a new arrangement. Collecting, at least in the West, where time is generally thought to be linear and irreversible, implies a rescue of phenomenon from inevitable historical decay or loss, cited from Linda Tuhiwai Smith, Decolonizing Methodologies. This new arrangement that gives enduring value referred to by Clifford is often the result of the hermeneutic process, in which a particular set of individuals are privileged with expertise in interpretation in case that there are any snags in translating what appears to be present with what is to be understood. Hermeneutics emerged from biblical scholarship, where Western society continued to move farther and farther from its cultural and historical roots, where the original biblical texts were situated. It was desired to bring them into conversation with contemporary questions about life, about society, and about the universe. And so when empiricism displaced the church's monopoly to knowledge creation, the tradition of filtering knowledge through an elite scholar class continued. Western scientists arose as the alternative to the clergy. And while empiricism challenged the idea that the Earth was the center of the universe, it centered the preeminent place of the white, Western-educated, male human scholar as the center of the phenomenological universe. Husserl, Heidegger, Merleau-Ponty, Gadamer, and Descartes are among the foundational theorists who built many of the concepts that have informed ideas about how to understand phenomena and how to interpret the empirical data, which their contributions continue to hang as a specter in anthropological knowledge creation. And even repudiations of their postulations must pass through the gatekeepers who guard their legacies, which, returning back to the actor network theory, is why the idea of decentering humans in their relationships with the world can be argued as a new idea, or why Raymond Dart is attributed with the discovery of the Tongchild skull, while in reality it was discovered by South African miners. Then and today, the growth of Western knowledge is predominantly recognized as being a pursuit of white, Western-educated, male human scholars. And here I'll shift a little bit more into why it is problematic to assume that these scholars are able to understand non-Western and Indigenous texts, stories, and narratives adequately. As I'm doing right now, an author or a narrator speaks with their audience in mind. I'm assuming assumptions and experiences of those of you listening. Paula Gunn Allen's work, The Sacred Hoop, speaks directly to these matters when she acknowledges that Westerners naturally tend to see literature in terms that are familiar to them, however irrelevant those terms may be to the literature under consideration. Allen specifically cites the Western assumption that a person shares a story in order to share their individual thoughts, experiences, or insights so that others can or will understand what it is that they felt. She points out that this idea of a private soul on a public wall is far from universal. And when you apply a positivist approach to knowledge generation to the natural world, it's also structuring how the social world is understood. Perceptions of relationships, separations, and the position of people in the world are implied through this Western paradigm. Western knowledge assumes that understanding the natural world is an empirical process. And while they see this as empirical, the way that the knowledge fits together is subjective. In reflection upon this, I'll leave with Smith's argument that the challenge then for understanding the social world becomes one of developing operational definitions for phenomena which are reliable and valid. And I think it's in this space that Western theorists and Western scholars are most culpable and most problematic, because things don't always have to fit with what you think should be there. And I think approaching fieldwork and approaching communication and approaching subsequent analysis and dissemination, if it's approached with humility, I think you can sidestep these 4 pitfalls. Thank you and have a great night. I look forward to being able to speak with you again.